Welcome to the Kindred Journey podcast, the podcast where women share their experiences of stepping into courage when comfort is no longer an option. This is the podcast for connecting in community with women who have been shaped by the liberating to challenging seasons that life endures. I am your host, Leslie. I am a wife, mother, daughter, sister, and friend. I too have experienced these seasons in life, and I want you to know that you are surrounded by a community of courageous, real women here for you. I can't wait to connect, so grab your favorite beverage and join me on this kindred journey. Hey there, everybody. I am excited to bring you this week's episode, Finding Courage Through Selfishness. And I think it's a really good episode. It sounds probably harsher than it is from the title, but I wanted to grab your attention because I wonder, has anybody ever had a desire that they have, or a dream or something that lit them up that they have put on the back burner due to circumstance or timing or season, have you? I just got to throw that word in there, that has stopped you from doing so, that you knew deep down inside you needed to do. We kind of dive into that this week in the episode that I'm about to launch. And I just wanted to hop on here and kind of talk about that a little bit and unpack that, because I think in my next series of podcast episodes, we're going to be diving into Mother's Days in a few weekends, and how amazing mothers are out there and all that they do for us. But yeah, I think especially as moms, we put ourselves on the back burner. We put our needs on the back burner. Some people are experts at that, and I would love to hear your top secrets in doing so. But my interview with Becca Ingersoll, we talk about some harder seasons in her life that she had, and then this current season that she's in where she's taking time back for herself. And selfish kind of has a bad name to it. It has a negative attribute to it, when it's truly just filling our cup so we can give to those around us that we love the most is not that bad of a thing. But if we come from a depleted state versus a nourished and full state, then what space do you want to give from? Do you want to give from a depleted state, or somewhere where your cup is full and you feel good about it? And sure, there are going to be times where it's not always that way, or it doesn't work out that way. But this kind of is the direction I'm headed for this month, with interviews that I have lined up with moms, amazing moms, amazing stories of courage from moms, and also kind of the reason behind my in-person Mom's Day Out retreat that I am hosting next Saturday, May 11th. And if you're near to the Boise, Idaho area, I would love for you to join us. I will include the link in the show notes. I am super excited and super passionate about this event, because I visualize this to bring not only moms together in community and building sisterhood through motherhood, but to build on support from the community, and especially the panelist of speakers that we have that support moms and families and children in the Treasure Valley. And I think sometimes as moms, a few things. We don't fill our cup first, so we come from a place of depletion when we're giving back to others. And this is just my opinion, so take it or leave it. And also, I feel like sometimes motherhood can feel a little bit isolating, or you don't know where to turn to for a resource, or some help with, if your kid's going through a sleep regression, or, and you can go down the deep dark web of Google and try and get the answer there. But I think just having that in-person connection and community is so important. So I'm literally kind of going off of this episode of finding courage through selfishness. I am laying here with my almost 7-week-old laying next to me, getting a podcast episode out, doing some other things, all while trying to fill my cup, but be a mom to my two boys, and the other one's napping. So I mean, I'm just, it's possible, it is possible to fill your cup at the same time too. It's not easy for sure. And there's some sacrifice on other things, or time, or dishes and laundry can wait. So, I just want to emphasize that this event that I'm hosting next Saturday is, I'm so blessed that the community has showed up for me in ways that support me to host such a wonderful event. I have wines from Cinder. I'm having excellent, yummy food from it's a local restaurant here in town. And the guest speakers are amazing. They're Megan Doyle. She's a massage therapist, and she has a wealth of knowledge. I was introduced to her through our doulas, and I had some prenatal and postnatal support from her, and just the amount of knowledge she has. I'm so excited to kind of dive into her experience and background a little bit as one of the panelists. We have Jen Anaker. She's a chiropractor here in town. She does the Webster's method, and a wonderful chiropractor, serves a lot of moms, kids, families in the Treasure Valley. Kim Cross is a parenting coach, and I've heard her speak at another event I was at about a year ago, and she's amazing. She covers from young children to teenagers. She's just an amazing support and resource here in the Treasure Valley. And Morgan McDermott is a naturopath, and she's here in the Treasure Valley as well. And she also kind of focuses on the mom and prenatal and postnatal and kind of debunks some of the things out there as far as more the holistic side of things. So she can help you support in those ways, as far as like what not to do and what to do being pregnant. I know there's all the rules when you're pregnant and breastfeeding and all the things. So I'm super excited to have her on the panel as well. And Jillian Woods, she's a yoga instructor here in the Treasure Valley, and she actually offers a lot of prenatal and postnatal yoga classes, but also does other kind of yoga classes as well. So we're going to have an afternoon filled with wonderful support from resources in the Treasure Valley and a nice yoga class. We're going to have some lunch. You don't have to worry about making lunch, doing the dishes. I've got you there. Have some wine tasting from Cinder Winery. They have amazing wines if you haven't been. We're going to have some rosé and Viognier, kind of all the light fruity wines that they have that are delicious. And I've checked the weather, fingers crossed. I know they say if you don't like the weather in Idaho, just wait 5 minutes. It will change. Hopefully it stays in the 70s. So hopefully we can have this wonderful event outside the entire day, just to soak up that sunshine and be in nature as well, because I feel like that's such a key to grounding. And just, again, the goal of this event is to feel rested, restored, and to receive yummy nourishment, receive wonderful resources from this panelist of professional women here in the Treasure Valley, to receive a wonderful yoga empowering practice. I think it's going to be so great. Registration does close next Wednesday, May 8th. So if you are interested, I will include the link in the show notes for you to check out, and there's more information online. There's also my email address. If you do have questions, please feel free to send me any kind of email or an email with any kind of questions that you might have. Also included is a $50, it's a value of at least $50 gift bag every mom is going to receive at the entry of this event. So it's going to I've really honed in on trying to support local businesses for this event. And I'm super excited about that because, again, I'm so blessed with the way that the community has showed up for me for this event. And I have local candles, I have local bath bombs and local lotion and some local tea that's made just for this event from a local distributor who grows all their own herbs and makes their own tea. And it's amazing. I'm so excited. I hope all the moms that are attending benefit from this event the way that I have envisioned it, because this has been my kind of postpartum dream to get going, especially recovering from a C-section with my son. So I was kind of laid up for a few weeks, resting, of course, but also was like, I want to do something. I want moms to feel catered to, and I want them to receive. And that's the biggest takeaway from this event that I hope moms do receive, is that we need our turn to receive. And that's kind of what this episode talks about. So I'm super excited for this new month and kind of the topic of and having moms, amazing moms on the podcast this month, and this episode to kick it off. So I will, by further ado, I will introduce Becca Ingersoll, Finding Courage Through Selfishness, and I hope you guys enjoy. Hello, Becca. How are you today?
I am doing so well. Thank you for asking.
Oh, good. Well, I'm so glad to finally be with you and connect with you and get to know a little bit more about you. I
Thank you.
wish.
I'm so excited to be here too.
Yeah. Maybe you can share. I know we kind of connected a little bit for the last few minutes, but maybe you could share a little bit with our listeners about you and a little bit about your story.
Okay, yeah. So, like you said, my name is Becca Ingersoll, and I am a wife, a mom of twin 7-year-old boys. And I met you in a podcasting course that I recently took. So, I launched my podcast at the end of last year, at the end of December. It's called Finding Joy Through Life's Trials. And that's just been a running theme through my life. I've been through, well, everyone has been through a lot of trials, but I I talk about in particular the ones my husband and I have been through, namely infertility and having our boys as 23 weekers who lived
Wow.
in the NICU for almost 6 months before coming home. And then right after they turn, and they have some special needs, one more than the other. And then right after they turned three, one of them, Lincoln, was diagnosed with leukemia and went through 27 months of treatment. So those are our big trials that we've had to face. But I just want, luckily, Lincoln's in remission now. He's doing great. And I've always tried to focus on the positive and look for blessings in my life, and my husband the same. So, because that helped us get through these tough things. And that's kind of what I talk about on my podcast and in my writing.
That's wonderful. And I think I've had the opportunity to listen to a few of your episodes, and just your perspective on life is so beautiful. And I appreciate people like you, sharing the message that they share with the trials that they've been through, and the outlook and optimism that they have from those,
Thank
and the
you.
strength. So thank you for that. And before we do get deep dive and get
Mm-hmm.
completely started, I just want to let you know that this is a safe space for you to share your story. So everything that you say is honored and respected here. And please feel free to speak freely and share as vulnerable as you like. I know it takes some courage sometimes. For me, sometimes I don't even think twice about talking to a stranger or somebody new about opening up, and so. But some people, it's not quite the same. So thank you for
Right.
being here and sharing.
Thank you for that introduction. That's
Yeah,
wonderful.
absolutely. Would you, I know you kind of touched on a few things, but is there particular moment or season, or however you want to share your story, where a season or moment in your life was incredibly challenging, where comfort was no longer an option and you had to step into courage?
Ah, I kind of feel like this. I don't know if this is exactly answering your question, but it's what I thought of when I read about that question and you just asked it. So obviously, during Lincoln's chemo treatment for over 2 years, even though we've had a lot of trials, we that's the toughest one we've been through. It's kind of ironic because leukemia actually has a pretty good prognosis. So when he was initially diagnosed, we were given the odds that 85% of kids who are diagnosed at his age, 85 to 95% of kids survive 5 years and beyond after their diagnosis. And so that was pretty good odds in relation to the fact that when my boys were born, they each just had a 50% chance of survival.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of funny that, well, funny in a dark humor kind of way, I guess.
Sure, sure.
um, Funny that,
Enlightening.
yeah, exactly. Enlightening that
Yeah.
our harder trial was cancer, even though the odds were better.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and by the end of those 2 years, I was just very depleted and very, as you can imagine, being a caregiver of a young child for that long. And Lincoln also has cerebral palsy and he's mostly nonverbal. So it was over 2 years of watching him suffer, but not always knowing or being able to mind read exactly what was causing issues. And so that's an ongoing thing when you have a nonverbal kid of trying to read their cues and be able to solve those issues. But it was, it took a toll on me and um, Josh, my husband. And as we were nearing, as we were seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. So he ended treatment in at the end of March 2022, so almost 2 years ago. And as that date was approaching, I started really feeling a fire in my soul, like, okay, that coming up when this time is over, it's time for me to focus on me. you know,
Mm-hmm.
like not that I was going to like run off and abandon all of my responsibilities or anything, but I just knew that I, through necessity, had put myself on the back burner for so long that it was my time to step up and stop being fearful of things that don't really matter in the long run and truly step into what I wanted my life to really look like. So I have always wanted to be a writer. I had thought about blogging for years and years and years, but had always been afraid of criticism, or basically that's the big thing. What will people say? Is my writing good enough? Putting myself out there, things like that. Would I succeed or not? And as I as we finished Lincoln's treatment, I was just like, nope, I'm just gonna go for it. And I mean, I've always been interested in self-help and self-development. I'm an avid reader, but I decided I really wanted to focus on it. So I hired a life coach and I was with her for 18 months. And with her help and obviously the actual work I did myself, I've been able to, I mean, obviously, there's always more to do, but I feel so much more myself and I'm so much more courageous. And I've had my blog up since, let's see, July of that year, July of 2022. And now I have my podcast and I'm working on a memoir. And so I'm doing a lot of the things that I always daydreamed about, but was fearful of doing. And
Mm-hmm.
I think Lincoln's treatment and the other trials too, but especially his treatment brought things into perspective of the fact that the things I was worrying about didn't really matter. Like we'd literally stared death in the face and we'd gotten through it. And so I just felt more confident and like I could be brave and get over those societal fears.
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you just said about the things I was worrying about didn't even matter. And I think through your seasons that you've had and your trials and tribulations, and something you kind of said more towards the beginning was that that Lincoln's cancer season was harder than infertility and having
Mm-hmm.
premature babies. And my son was in the NICU for just 5 days, so I can't even
Mm-hmm.
imagine,
Yeah,
but you probably built strength and courage through those
absolutely.
experiences that maybe why the leukemia seemed harder.
Mm-hmm.
It it was, but it maybe wasn't, because you've built on these other seasons where
Yes,
your courage and bravery and challenges expanded you as a human and as a mother. And does that make sense? Because I mean,
absolutely. I 100% agree.
yeah,
Yeah,
I think it's just so fascinating, like you said, because well, there's a higher life expectancy with this. Why does this seem harder than what? But you've been through that, and it's not. I feel like when we're in something or in a season, it seems so heightened, and I mean, and it is hard, and to
right.
acknowledge that. But I think that is so important for you to recognize what you needed as
Mm-hmm.
Becca, because
Yeah.
yes, you're their mom, but at the same time, you're your own person as well, and that kind of probably stuck with you. Sounds like deep down you've had that feeling for a
Yeah.
while.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I don't know what made me think of looking this up today, but when my boys were in the NICU, I came across a poem that, do you mind if I share it?
Oh, I
I
would
didn't
love,
write it or
yeah, please
anything, but
do.
let me pull it up. So some people might hate this because it could seem a self-aggrandizing or something like that, but I just love it because the poem is titled "How Preemie Moms Are Chosen," and just certain things about it stick have stuck with me throughout the years, and so I'll talk about the main one after I read it. So this is by Emma Bombeck, and it says, did you ever wonder how the mothers of premature babies are chosen? Somehow, I visualize God hovering over earth, selecting his instruments for propagation with great care and deliberation. As he observes, he instructs his angels to take notes in a giant ledger. Beth Armstrong, son, patron saint, Matthew. Marjorie Forrest, daughter, patron saint, Celia. Carrie Rutledge, twins, patron saint. Give her Gerard. He's used to profanity. I love that one. Finally, he passes a name to an angel and smiles. Give her a preemie. The angel is curious. Why this one, God? She's so happy. Exactly, smiles God. Could I give a premature baby a mother who knows no laughter? That would be cruel. But does she have the patience? Asks the angel. I don't want her to have too much patience, or she'll drown in a sea of self pity and despair. Once the shock and resentment wear off, she'll handle it. I watched her today. She has that sense of self and independence so rare and so necessary in a mother. You see, the child I'm going to give her has a world its own. She has to make it live in her world, and that's not going to be easy. But Lord, I don't think she even believes in you. God smiles. No matter, I can fix that. This one is perfect. She has just the right amount of selfishness. The angel gasps. Selfishness? Is that a virtue? God nods. If she can't separate herself from the child occasionally, she will never survive. Yes, here is a woman whom I will bless with a child less than perfect. She doesn't know it yet, but she is to be envied. She will never take for granted a spoken word. She will never consider a step ordinary. When her child says mama for the first time, she will be witness to a miracle and know it. I will permit her to see clearly the things I see: ignorance, cruelty, prejudice, and allow her to rise above them. She will never be alone. I will be at her side every minute of every day of her life because she is doing my work as surely as she is here by my side. And what about her patron saint? Asks the angel, his pen poised in the air. God smiles. A mirror will suffice. And so it's kind of, like I say, especially the last line. I'm like, I don't know about that. But I
Mhm.
love the line that talks about being selfish enough,
Mhm.
because honestly, mom guilt is such a thing. Like
It
such a thing.
is.
I had no idea how much of a thing until I became a mom. But what I have come to realize that it's kind of true for me that if I were 100% selfless, I wouldn't have been able to make it. Like I've had to be able to take time for myself, sometimes more time than others, but I just had to be able to refill my cup. And I don't know if that's a gift I was given because we went for so long without having our kids and wanting them so desperately that I got pretty good at doing what I wanted. You know what I mean? And I wasn't willing to give that up, or what. But I don't know. That your question just reminded me of that, and your
Yeah,
comments about the fact that you have to have your own self worth outside of your children.
absolutely. I think it's so important, and I think that poem, just strong is the word that comes to mind, and it's so. And I know selfish can get pictured a bad image in a lot of ways, and I'm learning as well because I am a
Mm-hmm.
giver by nature. I just
Yep.
love to give, and
Yep.
my time, my energy, cooking, whatever it might be, and I think, but yes, being a mom, you give so much, and being depleted is, so there is a balance, and it's not a
Yeah.
bad thing to
Absolutely.
have the boundaries around your time, or to be quote unquote selfish. It's not, I've been playing with this a little bit lately, fixing good and bad to things. It just is,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
versus like,
Yes.
why do we have to put a label on it?
Uh-huh. Yep.
My sister sent me a email with, I don't know if it was a Chinese proverb, or it was something where it was like, the son broke his leg, so he wasn't called to war. Where all
Mm-hmm.
well, breaking the leg was bad, but he didn't have to go to war, and then he didn't
Right.
die. So
Yeah.
it just is, versus affixing and spending energy on putting a good or a bad in front of it.
Yep.
And I think, like you said, because I know your story a little bit, and I don't want to spoil it for the listeners. I want them to go listen to your podcast. But you and your husband decided to wait,
Mm-hmm.
after getting married a few years, to have kids, and kind of have that honeymoon phase of life,
Right.
and
Mm-hmm.
and and then infertility came up, and so you waited longer than anticipated. But
Right.
like you said, you kind of got familiar, used to knowing what you wanted, and having your I think you knew what you wanted out of
Mm-hmm.
life. And I
Yeah.
think that that's important. My husband and I got married in our 30s. And
Mm-hmm.
so we already knew who we were as individuals.
Right.
And then we came
Right.
together, and then, but creating a blended, a family where we know what we like, and we're
Mm-hmm.
not stuck in our ways, but compromising is a lot harder than it is when
Yes.
you're kind
Yes.
of young and in your early
Uh-huh.
20s and figuring it out. So I can totally relate with that. And I think people ask me the same thing, like, well, how do you have time for a podcast? I was like, I don't. it's
Right.
it's mostly compromising my sleep at night when everybody's in bed or quiet, and pushing publish at 11:49 the night before I try and launch my episodes. But
Right.
it's for me, because my season right now, being
Mm-hmm.
a mom of early babies, and
Yep.
in that season of, I don't want to say trenches, but it sometimes feels like that.
Yes.
Some days are
Yes.
harder than others.
Uh-huh.
And it's for me, because I can't do the things that I used to enjoy
Yeah.
doing
Right.
pre kids. So I think you starting a memoir, and I think you have so much wisdom and knowledge to share with people. I'm so proud of you for stepping into that, and really, like you kind of had that in you, it sounds like. Was it before kids, or was it uh
Um,
when did you kind of like have this I don't want to say self discovery, but you had this urge and this feeling that you wanted to kind of pursue and perceive that?
honestly, like to a certain degree, most of my life, like I've always wanted to write. As far as like I loved going to the library. I loved reading books. I loved writing little stories. I English was my favorite subject. English was my major in college. I taught English. I was a librarian. So all of that has been all of my life. But as far as thinking that I wanted to write about my own story, that probably started with infertility, probably because I've also, like you said, I'm a giver. I love serving people. I love helping people in some way. And I thought if I go through something challenging, why not make the best of it and maybe offer people some kind of hope if they're going through something challenging too. So since I'm going through something challenging, maybe this can be a lesson that I can share with people. So maybe I'll write nonfiction.
Yeah.
And maybe I won't always write nonfiction, but that's what I primarily am working on now.
I think that's fantastic. And have you always had that perception in life, or since going through, and like, you want to help others by
Yeah,
sharing your message, or is that more, like you said, kind of the memoir kind of spurred from the infertility
right.
and your journey?
I've always wanted to help people and share with people. I think that's just part of my upbringing. I've said this on a few interviews, and it's so true. And if you know my dad, then you've heard this before. But my dad always says, like, if you ask him what he wants to do in life, or if he has a dream, he's like, I just want to make the world a better place. Like that's
Mm.
just always that's what my parents are like. And so I've always had that. And then probably as far as sharing my own message, it probably started with infertility. Yeah,
And do you feel like this was your calling from God, to, as part of your experience, to,
pretty much. Yeah.
yeah.
Like we've kind of touched on this, but not said it explicitly. several times already in this conversation, but I feel like in life there are breadcrumbs that lead you to, if you're paying attention to what you're supposed to do. Or you talked about like kind of building blocks, like one trial, you will learn certain things that will help you overcome the next trial and so on. And I feel like if you're in tune with, for me, it's God, but other people might just call it the universe or whatever your
Sure.
belief is. I feel like you you come to earth with certain gifts and talents, and if you pay attention to what you feel called to do, then that's where you'll have the most success.
Absolutely. Versus trying to fight it
Yes.
and resistance and why
Mm-hmm.
me and why did this happen to, and
Yep.
because that's exhausting and that energy gets you nowhere other than
For
just
sure.
depleted.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's such a great outlook on that and a great perspective of that. I just listened to a podcast last night and I can't remember, it was on just my random shuffle or
Uh-huh.
whatever
Right.
came on
Right.
next. And I think that's a God nod for me. I think it's kind of
Yep.
fun when I'm doing chores or something and I have my
Mm-hmm.
earbuds in and I'm like, "Oh, what podcast is gonna play next?" And I think it's just
Yes.
kind of handpicked or hand
What you need.
selected and
Yes, I
yeah.
love that. I love that. I feel like
And
that about books too. Like books that
yeah,
I randomly feel drawn to read at a certain point just helps so much.
absolutely. And this podcast was hard doesn't always have to be bad. And kind of what you were
Mm,
just sharing
yeah.
was, your experiences happen to you for a reason and it prepares you for the next trial or that and we were talking before I hit record like I don't wanna jinx the sleep. My son
Right.
slept until 7:30 yesterday morning, and so I was like, "Oh, well, when is this gonna end?" I was more
Yeah.
focused on the, "When is this gonna stop?" versus embracing and relishing in the, "Oh, this is so nice
Yep.
that I have a morning to just drink my coffee and journal and
Uh-huh.
kinda just have a quiet morning to myself." So, yeah, I think it shapes you into who you are, and like you said, if you're willing to receive it, I think
Mm-hmm.
is also another hard thing for givers,
Yes.
especially to
Yes.
receive, because I am one that's like, "Oh, no, I've got it, I'm good," and
Mm-hmm.
preparing for our next baby, I am definitely working on the receiving of
Yes, you
help
need to.
and meals and all the
Right.
postpartum things that I wasn't really aware of the first time,
Mm-hmm.
but,
Right.
yeah, so I think that's absolutely wonderful, and I think, so maybe in your message of kind of the season, I know with your son having leukemia, that was where you had to step into courage, but also, do you feel like I've kind of talked about this on a few episodes, where courage isn't always chosen, it's sometimes
Yes.
forced on
I
you?
just listened to your episode with Christina Driscoll.
Oh,
Loved
yeah.
that episode. And yeah, it's true. Like a lot of the time in both the like micro preemie world and the childhood cancer world, moms all the time are like, people say, I don't know how you're so strong. I couldn't do that and things like that. And there's a common theme of, well, yeah, you could. You just would because it's your
Mhm.
kid and you're going to fight for them. It's not like you're going to give up if
Right. You
this
don't have a
happens.
choice. It's
Yeah.
not an option. Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. And so do you think that season or more maybe this new season or like you said, remission was
Mm-hmm.
in 2022 or
Uh-huh.
when or
Yeah.
end of treatment was 22?
Yeah.
So and now this kind of more time for Becca to maybe focus
Mm-hmm.
on your hopes and dreams and passions and what's driving you is it's a little scary, like you said, you felt like, "What are people gonna think about what I have to write, and what do you
Mm-hmm.
do you think this season is more? Because I can kinda relate in a sense of some seasons of forced courage the last few years
Yeah.
for us as well, and then maybe this newer season of chosen courage for me, starting this podcast and moving on to
Yeah. Yeah.
some new ventures as well. Do you think that this season of courage is harder in ways or like it's vulnerability on it's chosen. It's not
Right.
forced on
It's
you. So you're
chosen.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think there are some things that are easier and some things that are harder. One thing that I thought of while you were asking the question was like, if it's a courage that's forced on you, at least for me, then, like you said, it's not really a decision. You just do it. Whereas if it's a chosen courage that you're choosing to show up, then some things are easier if you just make a decision and you just go for it and never look back. But if you are choosing it, then it's a constant choosing. Like
Mhm.
every week I could choose, oh no, I don't want to do a podcast anymore. Like there's pod fade, like most
Right.
podcasts don't last beyond 7 episodes, or yeah, or I'm not saying that like I'm always courageous. Definitely not. Like hell no, sorry, but you know, it's
Yeah.
like every new thing I second guess or have self doubts. Like right now, I'm planning and hopefully going to have a reading retreat and for the first time, and it sounds so fun, and I'm so excited about it. But it's over and over telling myself it's okay if only this many people sign up. I don't have to be this much of a success, like the comparison game, like it's always going to be there. And those kinds of things happen more and are harder with chosen courage.
Sure. I can totally relate to that, and I think kinda like you said about the other moms, with preemie babies and
Mm-hmm.
of kids with cancer, like, you don't have a choice but to show up for your kid. You're doing
Mm-hmm.
it because 'cause you're in it, but this more chosen courage, and it's more of a liberating
Yeah.
season that you're in right now, and like you said, there's a lot more time to think about consciously make decisions
Yes.
of showing up for yourself versus when you're in that survival mode of just, I have no other choice but to sink or swim right now. Like,
Mm-hmm. Right.
but kind of with this chosen season of like, oh, do I want to do this? Like you said, the program, or do you want to put out that episode, or, so it's kind of more of a, not a him and a haw, but just you have more, you have more control over the
Yeah.
courage
Yes.
versus just doing it to survive and
Yeah.
to make it through. I think that's, but I think in a way that's almost more bold and more courageous
Yeah.
because you have more flexibility in your choice to
Yeah.
choose.
Yeah. And
Does
I've
it-
also, a lot of the self help books I've been reading and listening to lately, a lot of them talk about the fact that it's sad, but like if you look at society, the majority of people don't choose to take those bold actions, be courageous and take those bold actions. So it is admirable, and it's partially admirable because um, so few people choose to. Because those fears, like I was talking about earlier, fears of failure, fears
Mhm.
of, I don't know, maybe starting a business and it not the first one not working out. There are all sorts of fears that we can have. Sometimes those can be more what's the word I'm looking for? Paralyzing than something like you
Absolutely.
said that is just forced upon you and you just do it. You just find your strength within and just do it.
Absolutely. And I think that's something we get so fixed on is the fear of failure, rejection, or it's like instead of what's the worst that can happen,
Mm-hmm.
why aren't we wired? I mean, protection,
Yes, yes,
survival
survival.
yeah,
Yeah.
our innate being, but like why not what's the best that could happen,
Mm-hmm.
And I think
Yeah.
that that's something that I've been trying to play around with a little bit,
Yeah.
especially with this upcoming baby. We
Mm-hmm.
checked a lot of boxes with my first son as far
Yes.
as long labor, lots of options through that labor, ended up in emergency C-section, so there was,
Mm-hmm.
and trying not to get in my own head about this
Yeah.
upcoming baby, like that was its own situation.
Yes. Separate.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and that prepared me for this next situation.
Mm-hmm.
And this next labor and delivery. So I think just taking the fear out of our choices and our experience, and not making a narrative or building a narrative from our previous experiences
Mm-hmm.
and taking them into our next. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And one thing that fascinates me and frustrates me is the fact that when I think about it, I'm like, we were talking about survival mode. Like, we're wired this way because we had to be in the early days of humanity in order to survive. But sometimes I think I'm like, humans have been around for thousands of years. Why do we still have this in our
Right.
brain? Right? Like, this isn't going to kill me to do this, but the fight or flight response is still there as if it were going to kill me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, it's so interesting. And I've been kind of toying with the codependency thing a little bit.
Yes.
Like, I'm
Yeah.
not codependent on everybody, but then
Mm-hmm.
even asking a question or
approaching somebody with, I don't like conflict. So
Yes,
I've
yes.
been almost like choosing to put myself in situation, like not in like, I'm going to come with
No,
my,
no, I know what
like
you're
peacock
saying.
chest
Uh-huh.
and ready to, to a rooster fight kind of a thing. But like just to dabble in these, because your brain,
Mhm.
like the more you dabble in something like
Yes,
that, your brain is gonna release that alert button and it's not gonna be as strong.
absolutely.
And
Yep,
so
I totally empathize with that. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, that's just something I've been kind of playing with a little bit. Like, well, what if I did ask this question? Or,
Mhm.
oh, that they set a boundary around that. I don't want to even ask. And it was, and I asked, and it was a total, not misunderstanding, but it was like, "Oh, yeah, you can totally come," or, it was
Mhm.
so,
Yeah.
anyways, it's just
Yeah.
interesting when we build up this thing in our head,
Yep. Mm.
and it's like, just ask the question or just do
Yes.
the thing. It's not gonna hurt. It's a low risk,
Uh-huh.
low reward kind of a situation, so
Yeah.
why not, you know?
Exactly. What a couple of the main things that my life coach taught me were, first of all, and I still struggle with this, but it's kind of like what you were talking about of experimenting, like just asking the question, like, what if? Like a lot of the time we go to worst case scenarios. Like, so for my blog, what if no one reads it? She was like, well, what if it's a wild success? I'm like, oh, yeah, I can ask that question too. And that's much more positive.
Mhm.
Or the other thing that I do a lot is, and I'm trying to do less of, but is we call it putting thought bubbles above people's heads. You know,
Mhm.
we preconceive how we think someone is going to react or think or what they're going to say. And a lot of the time it's so far from reality. It's not the truth.
Oh, yeah.
And so just like you were saying, just in a not like obviously be nice, not aggressive or passive aggressive, but just asking questions or whatever without, like you said, a codependent tendency of needing
Narrating.
their apps, yeah, of narrating what it's going to be or of being hurt in advance, whether they say something wrong or that you don't like or not. It can be their response and it doesn't have to mean anything about you.
Right. I just literally had this conversation with my counselor last week. I was like, "Am I the most selfish, unselfish person that I think I could be?" And she was because I was similar situation. My husband made this big old sigh the other day, and I was like, "Oh no, what did I do wrong?" And it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't even about me, but I made it
Yep.
and like I had the conversation with my husband. We were laughing afterwards. I was like, "Why did you sigh? Like, were you frustrated or mad at me?" Or and he was like, "No,
Uh-huh.
it wasn't even about like it was a Monday morning and." He
Yeah.
forgot to do something before getting out the door, it was just like
Mm-hmm.
it had
Right.
nothing to do with me, and so I was asking my counselor, I'm like, "Am I the most selfish, unselfish person?"
Yep.
Because I feel like, "Oh, I'm such a giver and a doer,"
Yep.
and I'm like, "Wait a second, I'm kinda selfish now, like, that I'm thinking about myself all the time
Right.
in this manner," and it's like, who cares? Like, just l if we
Yep.
release that from ourselves
Mm-hmm.
and give ourselves permission to be our authentic free
Mm-hmm.
selves, like, because and that's the irony, like, nobody's
Yeah.
thinking about you as much as you think about yourself.
So true. Have you have you seen Schitt's Creek?
I haven't, but I
Okay.
on it's on Netflix, right?
It's on
Or
what is it on? Hulu?
I
Now I
think my
can't remember
sister
what it's
watched
on.
I think my sisters told me about it and
It's on
watches.
something. It might be
Okay,
Netflix. Now my mind's
who
blank.
knows?
But you should watch it. And one of my favorite like light bulb moments was watching that show because I have always I'm trying not to be, but I've always been a people pleaser and worried what other people say. And one of the characters is like that and just worried what other people are thinking about him. And there's this one season where he is actually going to get to take a driver's license test and his sister drives him to it or whatever. And she looks at him and she says something like, David, nobody's thinking about you the way you're thinking about you. Like they
Yeah,
all have their own lives that you are thinking about yourself more than anyone else's. And it really takes the pressure off when you realize that.
absolutely, and I think something that you kinda said in your conversation with your life coach and maybe just to even reframe your question, like what if nobody reads it? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
who cares
Who
if nobody
cares?
reads it, because it
Right.
makes you feel good. Like I feel good
Exactly.
writing and it makes me happy and I'm putting this out into the world abundantly, and whoever wants to receive it is, and that's kind of how I've
Exactly.
reframed, like you said, the comparison mode
Uh-huh.
and this podcast is my passion. Like I don't have a business behind this. I'm doing this for fun. I love connecting with women. I love talking about hard things that we've been through and how we overcome them. And that's really how this podcast came
Yep.
about. And same thing. I was like, oh, I have 2 likes on my little reel. And I'm
Right.
already like the worst millennial about social media. I hate it. I don't care for it. I don't it doesn't jive with me. And some days I'm like, cool, I'll message some people or be on it. But then I'm like, nope, I don't even want to have my phone in the same room as
Yeah.
me today. Like,
Yeah.
but it's so funny how I'm like, well, Leslie, you're not doing it for the social media and the likes. You're doing it
Yeah.
for having this right here
The connection.
conversation. Yeah,
Yeah.
the connection. And if somebody can overcome some hard times in their life from listening to an episode that somebody impacted them,
Hmm.
then that's what I'm doing. And it's if I
Absolutely.
ever receive the affirmation or validation from that, it doesn't matter because it makes me feel good at the end of the day, and I
Yep.
get excited about showing up and doing the podcast and putting these
Yes.
episodes out there, and so really just, yeah, getting out of the comparison mode or in my own head about the, "Who
Hmm.
cares if nobody likes it?" Like,
Yes,
or nobody listens
exactly.
or so.
Yep, that's a good reminder because I think sometimes we can, at least for me, you can understand logically those things. You learn things in life and then you keep going and sometimes you forget that lesson and you have to be reminded of it again
Mhm.
and again or whatever. So yeah, it's not about how many downloads your podcast has or whatever, but it's challenging as humans,
Yes.
especially in the social media world, to not compare, but it's nice to have that reminder that that's not why we're doing it in the first place.
Absolutely. And I know my husband, he's a very competitive natured
Mm-hmm.
human
Yes.
being and bless his heart. We have a lot of the same interests, but for different
Mm-hmm.
reasons. I do it for
Yeah.
enjoyment and exercise, and he does it for purpose and,
Yeah.
he eating his old time or whatever. So
Uh-huh.
he's like, well, how many downloads do you have? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't even know how to look for that. Like, I'm like,
Good for
I,
you. Don't find out because
I know.
you can become obsessive about it.
I know how to hit publish and it is funny because yeah, I was a few weeks ago wanting to receive that affirmation from social media or likes or whatever,
Yeah.
and I had 3 people say personally to me like,
Mm-hmm.
keep doing what you're doing. I just listened to
Yeah.
so and so's episode, and so it was really
Mm-hmm.
refreshing to me to have that the impactful validation from people
Yes.
directly versus a review or a like or
Right.
whatever.
That's
So,
wonderful. And I've thought a few times, I'm so glad that you started this before your second baby because any mom knows that
yes.
you get into this little bubble when you have a newborn and I'm glad you have this for yourself and you'll have a connection. Like one of my biggest goals with my anything I do, but podcasting, writing, whatever, is I want other women, moms especially, to know that they're not alone. Like we have so much more that is alike and that we can connect about than things that are different. And I hate the thought of like I've always wanted to like everyone to have a friend. You know what I mean?
Yes. Oh my
And
gosh, yes.
podcasting, like you don't have to physically be in the same room to feel that appreciation from someone else or to help them or have them help you.
Absolutely. And I think what you just said is so true is that I remember I was actually asked to be a speaker on a panel last fall,
Mm-hmm.
and it was about loneliness and the seasons of
Yeah.
friendships where you're kind of more lonely. And I've always been very extroverted and make friends, no problem. And it wasn't until last summer when having my son, who was a
Mm-hmm.
little over a year old, and my husband works out of town in the summer, so
Yeah.
it was a very isolating experience for me because we
Yeah.
couldn't just up and go. We had to go, there was dinner time and bedtime routine and all the
Yep.
things. And we had to
Yep.
kind of stay here on our little island. And other friends have families and their own lives
Mm-hmm.
and things going on. So it was definitely a time of, like you said, having this community. And I think that was one of the best things that we got out of that podcasting class was
Mm-hmm.
community because
Yep.
we were in it to get we're in the same season, same phase, in it together, supportive of one another, and I've met some wonderful women
Same.
through
Yep.
that group that I'm their little cheerleader on the
Yep.
sidelines. So,
Absolutely.
That's so wonderful. And Becca, I think as we wrap up here, I love that you kind of shared two seasons where one was chosen, one was forced, courage, and one was hard in a sense of grit, roll up your sleeves hard, and one's more hard as in roll your sleeves up and put yourself out there.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
uh, what would you have told your old self? Or I know we kind of talked about you building and expanding on seasons of courage as well and kind of growing from those
Yeah.
moments. So, what would you have told your old self, however you want to share this, whether it was your son's leukemia or this current season that you're kind of in right
Mm-hmm.
now or exploring? What would you have told your old self, knowing what you know now?
Yeah. So I would have told my old self, and I also want your listeners to think that I'm speaking to them too, because I think everyone, no matter what phase of life you're in, can hear this. I would have told my old self that you are stronger and more capable of more than you could ever imagine. That's pretty succinct, but I truly believe that we downplay our own strengths and talents and what we can or can't do. And I really believe if we, like I said, I'm a spiritual person, so I think about God a lot, but like we're capable of more than, and his plan or hopes for our life is more than our plan or hopes for our life. And if we rely on that inner confidence, that inner knowing, then we'll be stronger and just get stronger and more capable as we progress in life.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I think that's so true and so beautiful. So, thank you very much. And if you would like to share where listeners can listen to your podcast and again what it's called and if
Yeah.
social media, if there's any of
Okay.
that, and
Awesome. Yeah, thank you.
your
So
blog.
yes. So my Instagram handle is at Blingersol, BL, and then my last name, Ingersoll. My podcast is called Finding Joy Through Life's Trials, and you can get it on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And my blog is called Mercy Rose, Finding Joy Through Life's Trials, and it's at mercy-rose.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much, and I hope that you have a fantastic day, and we'll stay connected and
Okay.
keep cheering each other on.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Leslie. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me and listening to the Kindred Journey podcast. If this episode resonated with you, please consider taking the time to rate and review the podcast and share this episode with family and friends who you think might enjoy it. Your positive feedback helps me reach more courageous women like you. This is my passion project, so without you, I wouldn't be here doing this, and I deeply appreciate your support. Until next time.